The historic Empire Ranch has been a working cattle ranch for almost 150 years. Its rich history includes successive ownership by two prominent Arizona ranching families, two corporations, and finally by the federal government on behalf of the general public. Originally established in the 1860s as a homestead of 160 acres with a flat-top four-room adobe ranch house and adjoining adobe-walled corral, and finally, the BLM took over in 1988 with a commitment to preserve the historic Empire Ranch buildings and interpreting them for future generations. Television series like Bonanza were filmed at Empire, and movie stars like John Wayne and Barbra Streisand filmed movies here. Sit back and enjoy the story of Empire Ranch as told by Empire volunteers Rick and Marti. Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast. This is where talk is all about the West, the spirit of the West, and especially the people and personalities that make up the West. And this is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and Cowboy Spirit Radio Production. Okay, it's a beautiful day outside, Russell, and I mean slam dunk beautiful. I can't even believe it. How are you doing today?
Well, it's always better in our business when the weather's good.
And gosh, I could believe that.
Everything looks a little better.
Okay, and are the horses happy today?
The horses are happy, and the guests are happy, and weather, perfect weather makes for very good days.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. I'm really happy today. We have got a couple of guests that are actually took the time, and I appreciate this very much, to come into studio. We've got Marty Conroy and Rick Collins, and they are from the Empire Ranch. Now, I know, Russell, you have spent a ton of time at Empire Ranch. You've actually done some speaking engagements at Empire Ranch.
So, as usual, you give me a little more credit than is due. I've been to Empire Ranch many times. Of course, it's right in the wheelhouse of what I enjoy. It's an historic ranch with a huge history, and they have an annual event there, and loads of people go, and there's some vendors, and there's some authors, and there's exhibitions, and if you're in southern Arizona, even if you're not, you should go, usually in November, and we'll hear more about it. But I have spoken there a few times talking about Dude Ranch history, which is interesting to 12 or 15 people in America, and then there's movie history, which is interesting to a far broader audience. But I love Empire Ranch. A great place.
So maybe I give you more credit than you deserve, and maybe you don't take as much credit as you deserve. Is that fair? Can we meet somewhere in the middle?
Probably.
Okay, let's meet. Marty and Rick, thank you very much for coming on in today. How are you?
You're welcome. I'm good.
Super.
I'm looking forward to really learning about Empire Ranch. I've never had the privilege of being there, although you've both been kind enough to invite me, so I will be making the drive down there. I've told my wife she's pretty excited. So tell us about Empire. Tell me about Empire Ranch. Like I said, Russell knows most of these things, but one of the things that I took away, a couple of things I took away, is to start with, it's still a working cattle ranch, isn't it?
It is a working cattle ranch from 1876 when Walter came and started buying cattle. Why, then it's still there. The Bureau of Land Management leases the 42,000 National Conservation Area to a rancher out of Sonoyta, and the cattle are there. They have added a herd of pronghorn sheep, which everybody loves. They come out there to just take pictures of those sheep when they are on the land. And it's a beautiful sight to see grassland this far west that is still there since 1876.
That's since 1876. That's remarkable.
Actually, it's even earlier. It actually dates to just post-Civil War when there's an influx of settlers in that area. And it started then. In 1876, it was bought by a cattle company, if you will. And that's when it really began to get going. But the original building dates to the late 1860s. So
That's absolutely remarkable. Now, just for anybody listening, Rick is a historical expert on southern Arizona, and Marty is a docent at Empire Ranch. So really, I'm in the presence of greatness here. So Marty, since I want you to step into your role of a docent at Empire Ranch, tell me about it, would you please?
Yes, I will. Walter Vail came out in 1875 to make his fortune, and he wanted to do it in cattle. He saw this four-room building, had windows, but no glass in the windows. And he went back to the East Coast, and he borrowed money, and he came back in 1876 and purchased those 4 rooms. In the period of time that he was there before he moved to California, he made that into 29 rooms. There was a foreman's. There was an old bunkhouse that burned down. There's a 1880s adobe barn, and there is the South Barn, which was featured in a lot of the movies that were filmed out there.
And so what? And I've been there, and I should know the answer, but either way, it's a question I think that we should ask. So he bought. What did he buy? Because
he bought 160-acre homestead.
He bought the 160-acre homestead, and so a lot of people don't understand. The typical homestead in the U.S. was 40 acres, and that's, if you're in Illinois, that's what you're going to get. In the Desert Land Act, you could get 160, and in some cases 640, which is a square mile, or otherwise known as a section. So Walter bought this 4-room house with no glass in the windows and 160 acres, probably some water, and that was a homestead that had been proved up prior to his arrival.
Yes, because of the building with the 4 rooms, they had to make that.
Sure.
And that was an entrepreneur out of Tucson.
And where did they go from there? He
started buying bulls. He went to, I think, Douglas and bought some Durham bulls. Then he continued to just grow, and he would buy up ranches. We have a huge map in the office of the room that shows you what he bought up. He bought up ranches that were next to the water, and He went all the way to Happy Valley and almost to Mexico. He had 100,000 acres of land.
180 square miles is
180 square miles.
It literally ran to the Mexican border to the bottom of the Rincon, so it was huge.
That's remarkable.
And 40,000 cows in the late 1880s. So.
How many?
40,000.
No kidding.
No kidding.
40,000 on 100.
But he knew all about the overgrazing, and so that's why he moved some of his holdings to California and bought more land and leased more land and made this Empire Ranch, a mother-child breeding ranch. And he bought an island, Santa Rosa Island, where he put up a house, which is now a state park.
And you said he went back to the east and borrowed money to buy the homestead. So buying this island and getting grazing land in California, this all came from the proceeds of
what he did, yes,
and ranching. He wasn't an oil man ranching cows.
Sort of. He wasn't an oil man, but one of the cowboys was looking for strays, and he came back and he said, "Mr. Vail," he said, "I think there's silver in some of these rocks I picked up." That created the total wreck mine, and that came out with 6 years, I think, that it was working. There were 30 buildings, 300 people. His brother, Ed Vail, took care of that, went there and lived there, and it created a $500,000 at that time and put it right back into the ranch.
$500,000 at that time?
At that time.
Wow.
And where is that?
I have to explain it in that when you're coming on 83 and you're coming towards Sonoyta, on the left-hand side, clear at the top of a mountain, is a satellite dish, a big one. That's where the total wreck mine was.
Anything left of the ruins?
Not much,
buildings?
because they didn't use adobe to make the buildings. They used wood, and part of that wood could have been brought down for the children's edition, because that's the only room of the 29 rooms that are there that is wood.
So I got it. You brought up his brother Ed Vale, and you guys put out a newsletter. I don't know how often it is, but I get it and I enjoy it. And one of them was Ed Vale was an owner of Rancho de la Osa, which we now own, which was a monster cattle ranch once, and what's left now is a dude ranch, very historic place. And Ed Vale had come to Tucson for an event. I don't remember this part, whether it was Cattlemen's Conference or it's a dinner or something, maybe at one of the clubs or at Santa Rita, and he didn't have a jacket. And they said, well, you can't come in. And he said, well, I'm not riding all the way back to Rancho de la Osa to get a jacket. And they said, well, okay, I guess you can come in. But that was a story in one of your newsletters, because his brother Ed was involved in the ranch.
And, Walter Vale walked around with three-piece suits with a vest. And Ned took in the Western. He was the one with the high boots and the fringe jacket. He was the one that got mad at the railroad because they raised the rates during a drought. And he said, forget it. He said, I'll do my own cattle drive. And he did. And we have a book out there that is about that, because it was his journal. And our archivist took that journal and made this small book about that trail ride. And it took 9 months.
And that's a pretty famous story.
It is a famous story, because they had to cross the Yuma River.
So they went from where to where?
From the Empire Ranch all the way over to Catalina Island, which is where there is a pier there that's still named the Vale Pier, because that's where the
Yes, there is.
And why did they take them to Catalina Island?
Because the railroads had boosted their prices so much that nobody could afford to ship cattle. So he said, I'll do it on my own. And he did it successfully.
And he said he made more per head and lost very few. And they reneged after that.
But what was the purpose of going to Catalina Island?
That was part of the land that Walter had leased.
I got it.
And good grazing.
He was grazing the cattle on Catalina Island.
Get them fat again.
So there's still a few cattle on Catalina Island. There's a lot of buffalo and bison.
Okay.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's remarkable. When you get into back in the area where people are not, they're very, very prevalent. Okay, so now we've got Empire Ranch there. Tell me about Empire Gulch, because I know this is an inseparable part of Empire Ranch.
Well, it is, because it had the water that was closest to the house.
Okay.
And they say that when they first started, there were no trees there. That one of the cowboys coming from someplace else had some seeds that he planted, and they're all cottonwoods. Now, in the fire that occurred, the sawmill fire about 8 years ago, a lot of those cottonwoods burnt down, but we didn't lose one building because of the firefighting efforts. And that was 47,000 acre fire.
And the Gulch, by the way, features in any travel you do. So the Empire was predestined to be there, because if you were coming out of the Sonoyta Valley or coming from Fort Huachuca area, that direction, you had to go for water. It's the only water out in that plain.
Okay.
The Sonoyta Plain.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, was it the Navajo that are so prevalent on an Empire Ranch, the Navajo tribe, or was it a different?
No, the Apache come into the area, and the Atom also use it to a degree. So.
And isn't that where Fort Huachuca got its name?
No.
Okay, then I read that incorrectly.
Yeah, not from Navajo stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did Fort Huachuca? Because I know it's inseparable from Empire Ranch. Okay.
And I know it's they actually thought about building the fort at the Empire or near the Empire.
Right.
And instead, in 1879, they chose to put it down where it is presently.
Oldest fort in America. Mm-hmm. Oldest operating fort in America.
Operating fort.
That I did not know.
Yeah. Operating is a critical word. Interesting to me, and maybe we come back to this after a break, but you talked about it was founded prior to 1874. Walter buys it in 74, Walter Vale, and he was aware of overgrazing and the risks, and because as you guys know, Arizona went from 5,132 cattle in 1870 census to 1885. There was, that's not a census year, but Cattlemen's Association assumed about 700,000 cattle. So 15 years, numbers had just escalated tremendously, and then the droughts started to run in the late 1800s, and the overgrazing was overwhelming. Your comment makes me ask, did Walter Vail, did he see that risk where a lot of these other guys didn't? And
I think he did, because he knew that if he continued to keep putting cattle on there, it would overgraze and it would not come back. That's why he moved his headquarters to California. I also read that he was one of the youngest Pima County supervisors. So he was into politics. And when the railroad wanted to come through, he and Ned are the ones that owned the land, the piece of land that they wanted. So that's why it was Vail Station, because they sold it to them.
And what do you know the timing on when the railroad went through there?
It's in 81.
81.
Yeah.
Interesting.
1881.
And I've got to think back then, if you were a landowner, especially a landowner like Walter Vail was, being in politics was a necessary evil. I mean, you really couldn't do one without the other.
You bet.
And that's and I don't think, from what I've read, I don't think it was his favorite thing to do, but I think he figured it was just a necessary evil and just moved on from it.
Right.
Well, yeah, I think that's a really accurate comment, because a lot of these guys, they ended up gravitating that way.
Yeah, they didn't have a choice. They did not have a choice. I mean, they had to be masters of their destiny, and there was no other way to do it. Because even back then, there were people that didn't want anything built. They just wanted to preserve the life that they'd always have. And Walter Vail saw it a little differently.
So on that, we're going to give it a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The most common question we get at duderanch.org is, how in the world do I choose a ranch? There are hundreds to choose from. The answer is simple. Choose one of the 90-plus member ranches of the Dude Ranchers Association. Here are the 4 main questions these experts answer to help you narrow down the list to choosing the ranch of your dreams. The first one is, what time of year do you want to visit a Dude Ranch? Number 2, where do you want to go geographically? Number 3, what activities are most important to the group you're traveling with? Number 4, what kind of atmosphere and accommodations are you looking for? Now, if you're still struggling to narrow down that list, the professionals at Dude Ranchers Association are happy to help. Please reach out to info@duderanch.org or call them at 307-587-2339. That's 307-587-2339. Above all, choose a Dude Ranchers Association member ranch when choosing a vacation, and ride the West with the best.
So we were talking about this, one of the things that people who are rangeland experts, and it has controversy attached to it like anything, but that the overgrazing in the late 1800s all the way up to 1900, which of course fostered the National Forest Preserve Act, which was to manage the federal land, which out west is a significant portion. All that overgrazing, in many people's belief, and I reluctantly, not that I'm an expert by any means, agree that it changed the ecosystem, but when I look at Empire Ranch, it looks like, much like the San Rafael Valley, it looks kind of like what we think most of the lower parts of southern Arizona looked prior to this overgrazing. So if we dropped into a time machine in 1870s, we would have seen grasslands and the cactus and the mesquites and the creosotes and the woody shrubs, et cetera, were on the mountain slopes, and then when overgrazing occurred and the hydrology changed, down came those woody plants, the cactus, mesquites, etc. I mean, the Empire Ranch doesn't look that way. So do you think that's a testament to Vail understanding the risks?
I think so, but I want to compliment the Bureau of Land Management because they're actually removing mesquite and restoring the grassland further, and we have knowledge that the predator-prey relationship has improved among wildlife, so it's nothing but good.
Right. Well, and I as certainly not the expert, some cattle ranchers are vastly more than me, but I've seen kind of a shift in the agencies, the federal agencies and the state agencies, where they're more active in terms of trying to restore this.
Right. I think that's true. So.
Excellent. I would like to get back to, because this is something that fascinated me, and I think other people will find it interesting as well. The adobe buildings, the original adobe buildings, those are still standing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and when were they built approximately?
Well, the first one probably dates to 1868. It's a 4-room quad with a zaguan down the middle, a breezeway down the middle.
Okay.
And then in the 70s and 80s, then rooms continue to be added on to it.
When you say 70s and 80s, you mean 1870s and 1880s.
Yes. I don't think in the 20th century.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
they didn't have the exact date of the adobe barn, but at one time it had windows and it had a door, and they're just saying in the 1880s it was built. Okay.
And there are some issues with the adobe barn right now, aren't there?
There aren't now, but we had some problems a long time ago with the roof, and the U of A came and with their students and did all the strengthening of the wall. So now we've had dances in there, we have silent auction, we've had parties in there, and we've had docentors that have come out and eaten lunch after they had a tour of the house. And so we can use it. And we had a small fundraiser and raised one of the barn doors, and now we're looking to raise the other one.
So another fundraiser to do another barn door.
To do another barn door.
Okay. Now the improvements that the U of A students came in and helped design, are those obvious or are they?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they are because they're heavy beams.
Okay.
Structurally.
Okay.
That's
Great.
what they made it. We've had some wind damage, and we have to get people that will fix it because those are tin roofs, and they fly off.
Yes, they do. Okay, and that could be a problem.
Yes, it was. One flew almost all the way to the Machuca house.
Well, I always tell the story, and this is a fairly flat roof of our main lodge, and one of our workers in summer during the monsoon came and said, the roof's coming off the lodge. And I thought he meant roofing.
No.
And I went down, and sure enough, it was flowing in the wind. I mean, the roof, you could look straight up and see the sky and the rain falling in. So I think, Arizona gets some rugged storms, and we get some. What about, we just briefly, I think, touched on the Indians. 1874 is 12 years before Geronimo surrendered for the third and final time. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly within their broad range down there, those, the Chiricahua Apaches. Did they, I don't recall any stories about the Empire Ranch being a fortress ranch.
It is constantly used by soldiers and travelers as a safe haven. It's interesting, as the Empire starts growing, the road that goes up the Sonoyta Highway to I-10 ends up becoming more and more important. And from 1870 through 72, you're taking your life in your hands by traveling that road. There's a number of deaths up that road. There's even some Wyatt Earp stuff, related stuff a little bit later in 1878. But the Apaches, there's more of a threat than there is an actual action most of the time.
So not like, say, Pete Kitchen's ranch north of Nogales or some of those places. Right. Not right. Interesting.
The biggest thing we had was there in August of 1872, an officer, an enlisted man gets killed. Then there's a fight which ends in a Medal of Honor for the corporal leading the expedition, or the escort rather. And then following that, 5 Mexican cowboys run into the same group of Indians. I believe it was led by Taza, which is Cochise' son that died. But these 3 in a row, these Apaches are getting these guys. So
yeah, because you're close enough.
Yeah,
It's Cochise stronghold. I don't know,
right?
But it's certainly in their range.
Right. There's even some thought now that Coronado might have trooped through that area and probably went to the Empire if he did, so because of the water. So
the archaeologist that's trying to track down as much of, and it ends up, as you probably know more than me, that Coronado expedition was not just a group of people going down a trail identifiable, right, but they would go to places and then they'd send out excursions.
Sure.
And so it was kind of a many-pronged.
Right. Remember, the gold is always in the next canyon over.
Yeah. So it's interesting because the archaeologist, and her name escapes me, but
Denny Seymour.
That's it. Thank you. Found those wall guns and all this. Really an amazing achievement.
Right.
And so it's thought that he might have come through. It makes sense, right? Water.
It's possible that they did, yes.
Yeah.
So
maybe probable.
Remarkable.
I'm going to call the jury out on that one.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay. You've got some movie history down there as well, don't you?
We do have some movie history. It was during the Boyce era that the movies started being filmed out there. I suppose the biggest one was Red River with John Wayne. He liked this whole southern Arizona territory completely and loved to come out here. We've got pictures of the Boyces with John Wayne. We've got pictures of Walter Brennan when he was in the movie and using the area. What we do is we have a list of movies and TV series that were filmed on the Empire Ranch area. So there's a movie that I watched that the first 5 minutes are these 2 guys riding, and you see the mountains in the background, but they're riding in that grassland. Nobody would ever know that's what it is, except for the mountain in the back. Sure. We have a mountain out there that they call the Biscuit.
Right.
And that was used in Oklahoma and as the wagon train. But what people, if they didn't, you don't watch the background, you're watching the movie, you don't realize that was just a big circle, and so you kept seeing the Biscuit going around. And I watched old movies when I was young. I watched the 310 to Yuma, the original one, the night before I got on a train to move out here in 1966.
From?
Kansas.
So, how many movies?
52 movies and TV series.
Okay. So both TV and movies combined.
Some of
52.
the Gunsmoke was filmed out there.
Right.
A lot of the Tombstone movies. And so we always, when we have whatever movie it is, we use someone that can research some of the back stuff that people wouldn't think about with the movie and give that talk before. Steve Boyce was a big one on one of the movies we had because he was old enough to be around, and so he could talk about the fact of because Burt Lancaster was there, and I'm going to say Walter Brennan, I loved him anyway. And so it's fun to watch. That is a big item when they see it in the gift shop, that I have these brightly colored sheets that show all those movies, and people take them because they want to go home and watch them again because you've been out. Red River was, the biggest one was the scene that John Wayne and his son had the big fight in the South Corral. And that is definitely, we had a historian that came from South Carolina that was writing a book about Red River, and he came for that movie just so that he could see it, and he had all kinds of things to talk about.
Movies can have such a grip on people. We had a young man that's just sort of related to that. He shows up one day, and he's looks to be in his 20s. This was years ago. Asked to see one of us, and so I went down, and he says, I'm a student of early movie audio. And he said, I believe that Winchester 73 was in part shot on your ranch. And, we'd heard anecdotes about this movie, that movie, and some we knew and some we didn't. And I had not heard about Winchester 73, which is a very famous Western with Jimmy Stewart. And he says they had this gunfight and they had this cutting edge technology on the sound. And he said, I've been trying to pinpoint where it was. And so he has these copies from a copier that he had somehow extracted off the film. And he goes, I think this is your ranch. And I said, well, it is. And he goes, can I go up and look? And so then, of course, I go and get the movie. So it was the final shot, the whole final fight scene. But this kid, 20, was so interested in audio aspects of old movies that he had somehow, can you imagine the effort to figure out it was shot here? It's incredible. Talk about how Vail ownership transitioned to Boyce.
It was when Walter Vail was killed in California, 1906. He sent his young son, 18-year-old Banning Vail, out here to help run the ranch with the foreman that was out here. And he met somebody in Tucson, and they got married. And I think he had 3 or 4 kids. But there's people that, like Steve Boyce, and I think Beth Colby, remembers coming to the ranch and playing with the kids. Jim Colby was the one that was instrumental in getting it making it a national conservation area. Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, because the Colbys owned Rail X.
Yes, they did.
So, but I didn't. What happened to
after that,
Mr. Vail? Why? How did he get killed, and then how did it transition?
It was Thanksgiving Day, and he and his wife were riding the streetcar, and it stopped at their stop. And he got out and turned around to help her, and a streetcar came from the other direction.
Oh,
whoa!
And he had no estate, so this is why Banning came out at 18 and started running it. They sold it in 1928 to the Boyce brothers, which was the Chiricahua Cattle Company. There were 3 brothers that owned that company, and they bought 3 ranches. And they got to pick where they lived. And so that's where then the Boyce come in. And like I say, that's when most of the movie series were filmed, was during the Boyce era. They did some remodeling, and they had 2 sons, and that's why the field house was built, was for the young son, because he had started in a small house that's back there where they call it the Grove House, because it's back where all the cottonwoods are. And he needed a house because he had his first son was Steve, and then he had 3 daughters, and so they built the field house for that son. The Huachuca house, which is our gift shop, that was Robert's house. He called it his casita because it came from Fort Huachuca, and then they added some rooms when they started having kids.
I love it.
So movies, you guys do some stuff.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. We have 2 events. One's in May and the other's in September. They are movies that were filmed out there. We advertise and we say this is a free event. Bring your own food. Bring your chairs. You can come early if you want to sit in the front row. It's a great big huge solar screen that the loft brings out and blows up basically. And we watch the movie, and when it's through, you turn your flashlight on and you go back to your car and go home. And it's just people. We had 400 at the last movie.
And do you have people there to talk about what's going on at Empire Ranch?
Just that we do. They can come early and they can have docent tours. And we do that when we have our trail ride, which is our first event for the year. And that's the first Saturday in April. And we have a docent that they sign up for docent tours, so when they get off their horse and can still walk by, they can go through the house. It's an interesting story. We've done so much interpretation, some since Rick joined us, but before we made sure that every room had the preservation that had been done on the room, the architecture of the room, and what all the room was used for. Because as he started building, he would change what was in the room. There's 4 rooms. Was his partner, Mr. Hislop, and he, a bedroom. That was it, and storage. And then as they kept on moving, and as I say, he went back to New Jersey, married his sweetheart, and they had 6 of their 7 children. And she stayed out there. She did not build a house in Tucson. She stayed out there, which was interesting.
Well, if you've been there,
Yes.
you kind of get it. And what I hear about Tucson in the 1870s, it was not.
No, there wasn't much there.
It wasn't a beautiful place. Yeah, it was kind of rugged and kind of dirty, and so what do you call your annual event? Where
The
all
Cowboy
The
Festival.
Cowboy Festival, yeah.
Yes.
November.
First.
weekend.
Yeah.
And talk about that, because I've been there a lot, but what a lot of people go. God, my gosh, how many people go? Do you have a sense?
We get 2,000 or so.
Yeah, I'll bet.
We have vendors out there. We have speakers out on topics that are pertinent to the area. We have a color guard. We have Fort Huachuca's cavalry come out. We have different demonstrations of horsemanship and all that kind of stuff. So there's a ton. Am I skipping anything?
I've seen some military stuff. I've seen the Spanish barbs. I've seen Steve Boyce has some horses. He does
his
some
horse
stuff.
Just horsing around.
They have.
We try to get some nonprofits that can talk about the area, because the Santa Cruz Valley Heritage Area, that we're involved because that's part of us.
Sure.
And so anybody that is a nonprofit that wants to come out, your vendors, we have food trucks, we have a silent auction usually, and then we have like a bucket raffle the next day. But the demonstrations are really good. We've had cattle dogs demonstrate. We have the dancing charros. And these people, when they come out, we have a donation for parking, and they don't have to spend any more money out there if they don't want to.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard not to.
It is, but it is something.
Could.
The demonstrations, everything like that is all free.
Yeah, no, I've been there many times.
And you have an opportunity to have a great day, and you might actually learn something.
Yes.
Only incidentally.
The cowboy conversations have gotten really well liked. We usually have an author that talks, Doug Hawking, and he loves the ranch, so he's willing to help out. And he's written a lot of books about the area.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
anything that involves, we have the book that I told you about where Ned takes the trail ride. We've made that into a presentation where someone reads from. That is Ned, and the other one is like the person that just talks like you were. You're talking now. So
Maria Eastman, who you guys interviewed, she's also spoken before. So.
Okay.
She's good. Yeah.
A little bit ago, you referenced Wyatt Earp, and what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had Jana Earp on our podcast.
I told her she's got to go down to Tombstone.
She'd never been to Tucson been to Tombstone.
Tell them who she is. She'll get an argument started within 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Russell said he'd back her up. I don't know what that meant.
I'll keep the car running. So it's a nonprofit, so people can help by.
Yes,
and we need it.
And we do. We have an enormously large number of volunteers that are diehard volunteers. Some of them like to do the events. Others like to do our work days. We have a work day once a month, the first Saturday in each month. Everybody comes out and we give them a little breakfast. We give them lunch, and then they continue to stay. They're working on big projects because everything that we preserve, when you don't have old material, you have to make it look old in order to put it on there. And so not only are they repairing things, but they're making the new stuff look old because it has to. We've got some old pieces of the roof, the tin roof, and we use as much as we can. It's old, but we still have to do some new.
And you have some knowledgeable experts that can sort of guide this process with these volunteers who are providing the labor.
But it's them that are the ones that know what they're doing.
Right.
They're the experts.
You'd be amazed at the construction crew we have. I mean, a bunch of volunteers come out and they've got skills, which I wish I did, and they're doing a remarkable job. We have one volunteer who's a foreman for this crew, and he checks with BLM, so we're doing everything by the numbers, and it's an incredible working relationship.
That's great.
Really
So if somebody wants to just even sign up for the newsletter, can they do that? Is there a website? Where do they go?
There is a website. It's www.empireranchfoundation.org. And it has a lot of information. You would go through there if you want a big group to come out and have a docent tour, because like one of the RV parks has done that. Some of the other organizations, we have talks, we have presentations. We go to outreach booths, where I'm going to be at the Tombstone Book Festival on the 14th of March, and we're also going to be at the Watch Hawk in Tuvok on the 16th.
What now? Doug Hawking's running that Tombstone thing.
Yes.
What is the two-back thing?
The two-back is the whole month of March is for watching this special hawk, and they're having different times that they're having a thing. And on the 14th, they're having all the nonprofits in the area that we can talk to the people that are out there. But that is one of the days, I guess, because the kids are out of school, that they're going to have 4 raptors out there. And so it's but all month of March is watching this hawk.
Remarkable. And
we just had falconry out here this morning. So.
Did you really?
Yeah, Sky Island did it for an outside group. All right, EmpireRanchFoundation.org. It's always important to remember when it's O-R-G. Anything else?
Marty,
we're
Rick,
way over time.
We are, but it's been worth it. Marty, Rick, I personally want to thank you for making the trek there. I know it's not around the corner for you, but I really do appreciate you taking the time and expending the effort. Thank you for everything you've done today. I really appreciate it.
Well, go see Empire Ranch. It's an hour-ish from Tucson.
It is. So, it's 1 hour.
Yeah.
I drive it a lot.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Stephen. And we appreciate you good folks at the Empire Ranch for being a part of our program today. I'm Stan Husted. I'm the leader of the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. It's my privilege and my pleasure to help bring this fine program to you. And if you're looking for a way for perhaps you could be a part of this growing tradition of Western stories and tales and legends, we'd love to talk to you about that. Just reach out to me at stanhusted@gmail.com, stanhusted@gmail.com, and we'll tell you how perhaps you can be on the radio. You can thrive with your business, your stories, and perhaps even your Western storytelling in 25. By the way, this is a good time to think about coming to the White Stallion Ranch, where we have the opportunities available for you. And if we can't quite fit you in right now, we have a number of connections throughout the Dude Ranch Association and the True Ranch Connection. This is a good time. It's time for the Tucson Festival of Books coming up very soon. And it is spring training time in Arizona, so this is a great time to leave the cold and come to the warm and enjoy the hospitality and the entertainment available to you in our great cowboy land Southwest.
Russell, whenever we do one of these, and I find the history that gets shared is remarkable. And it's nice because we're coming from our theater room today, and I'm surrounded by pictures of the last roundup and Backlash and Winchester 73. And history is so important. And once we lose it, it's gone, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess I was focused on talking about the Empire Ranch. I didn't even think about the movie posters around us. But history is a big thing to me. I really enjoy it, and it just interests me. But ironically, these are all movie posters, and I think there isn't much that intrigues people more than movies and television and celebrities, and so that history is very much it interests people more than the Empire Ranch, possibly. They want to know what movie was shot there.
Well,
Red River.
Whatever it is, they like it.
Yeah, I guarantee you.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and thank you very much for being a part of the Cowboy Up podcast. We are grateful for your time, your attention, and your recommendations. Please leave us a review. We are thankful and thoughtful. And if you have something to tell us or some way we could serve you better, just reach out to us at thecowboyuppodcast@gmail.com. That's thecowboyuppodcast@gmail.com. Perhaps you have a story to tell, a book that you're writing, a song that you're singing, and maybe we could feature you on the program. We appreciate all that you do for us, and we hope that you will find a good thing happen to you in 25. As we often say, walk tall, stand up, be brave, be bold, do good work, and all the best and blessings to you. Till next time, bye for now.